for a lot of people that pay attention to your work, we feel like we have to go through pain in order for something to be meaningful. And
Right.
it doesn't really need to be that way. How have you been able to? Is it a perspective shift, or like how have you been able to overcome that, or at least deal with that
Yeah,
in
I
a
mean,
better way?
it is generally with me, it's very gradual. What I tend to do, I think this is quite typical, is I tend to have like these amazing sudden intellectual insights, but then it takes like months and years to actually live into a different way of doing it. Like you can think what you like on a park bench in Brooklyn, but then you got to like, do the slow work of changing. I think the point you make there is a really good one. It's not that actually it's not the sort of strictness of the schedule that is the problem. And absolutely, if you leave college or you leave a regular job to become an entrepreneur, self-employed, like there's a good argument for sort of giving yourself structure and because you're not going to get it from anywhere else. It's really the idea that then what happens is suddenly you look up and like the structure is in charge of you instead of
Mhm.
you in charge of the structure. And actually, if going to the gym would be the wisest thing to do right now, you should go, even if it clashes with the the structure. And I think this sort of speaks to a general point that I make in the new book about like rules should serve life. Like it's not the point to like for your life to serve a bunch of rules. Um, in terms of that idea as well that you talked about, that we tend to confuse effort with value. We think that like if something is really hard and painful, it must be worth doing, and if something is worth doing, it must be going to be really hard and painful. And there's a lot of that about in the personal development space at the moment. Maybe I'm sort of just asking never to get invited on like Jocko Willink's podcast by saying things like this. I don't know. But like, that's fine if that's your thing. But like this idea that life is fundamentally like a battle against temptation and a battle in favor of discipline, I feel like that has not served me. And I write in the book about this notion, which, has some good defenders. Tim Ferriss is famous for saying this as well, right? This question like, what would this look like if it were easy? Or in Elizabeth Gilbert's phrase, like, can you dare to be willing to let something be easy? If you want to do something, launch a business, give the opposite example, like what do you think about if you think like what if this turned out to be way easier than I'm expecting? Because again, I think the kind of people drawn to it are more likely to feel like, okay, I'm going to put it's discipline, it's effort, it's pain, um, and if you're already in that category, then it's probably the case that easing up on that is wiser. I mention in the new book an old book by a new age writer called Julia Rogers Hamrick. It's kind of like the continuum of personal development writers has Jocko Willink on one extreme and her on the other, basically. Like this book is like so unlike anything to do with, and it's called Choosing Easy World. And it's an old book, and she sort of makes this argument that her life sort of changed when she suddenly just realized that whenever she was facing a challenge, she could just like choose to live an easy world
Mm.
where everything is easy. And at first, like everything in me is just like, oh, give me a break, right? You can't just like affirmation yourself into things being easy. It's hard to do hard work. And the answer, actually, yes and no, right? There's something very powerful I've found about really thinking, okay, I'm going to go and do this thing in easy world. I'm going to live in easy world. And it doesn't mean challenges don't happen. It doesn't mean uh, everything is incredibly simple. It could be very complex. But it does mean you're not bringing this extra kind of, you're not going into the day like braced for a fight,
Mhm.
which just causes it to feel like a fight. Um, and it's all to do with weird issues of self-esteem and stuff. It's like, oh, I only feel like I really did my best if it hurt or something. Well, that's something that's worth trying to get over, I think, because it could be that you can be very accomplished and also have fun, and that would be the holy grail, really.
Why can't there be an and, right? Why can't it be both? I mean, we go into this
Right,
life, again, creating rules for ourselves or having these beliefs that just simply don't serve us. And when I spoke with Derek Sivers, probably last year, I
right.
think he's writing his new book now is Useful, Not True. It's like taking on beliefs that are useful for us. They may not be true. Eventually they could be true if we take them on as true and we can, give us some proof to reinforce it. But I think a lot of the time our suffering really isn't it's self-inflicted in a way, and the belief that something has to be hard could even make it hard.
Yeah, and another way of talking about what Derek's talking about there, I think, is that famous quote. I forget who said it originally, but like somebody said, the opposite of a great truth is also a great truth, right?
Mm.
So life is difficult, and it's really good to be able to surrender to that fact. It's also true that life is easier than you assume. And there are lots of these cases where I'm like, someone might say, like, but didn't you argue the opposite in that other place? And I'm like, yeah, probably. Right. It's like, that's fine. These are tools for engaging more deeply with life. And sometimes one is going to be more appropriate than the other.